For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Well, welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts, and joining us this time is Eric Johns of Wyrd Miniatures. Eric, thank you for joining us at Dunkin' Donuts today. I really appreciate it.
Always, as long as you buy the Boston cream.
I will buy you a Boston cream. Would you care for a coffee? Do you like hot, cold beverage? What's the temperature like right now where you are?
It's rather hot, so I'm going to go with the cold beverage.
A cold iced coffee? Do you want? How do you take it? Cream, extra sugar? What do you like?
Strangely, for a painter who has spent many nights painting all night long, I don't drink coffee.
That's probably smart, though, because you get the little jitters right in the caffeine thing.
Yeah, then God only knows what the models look like.
I can actually talk to you at length about how to paint effectively through jitters.
Really? Wow!
What a coincidence!
Wait, I have to. So before we ask Eric that question, I think that's going to be the first one. Let's be honest. We've done some lost chapters and some show episodes on sort of simple painting techniques and sort of the intro. How do you paint the basics? What are the basic techniques to get decent table quality models? But since we've got Eric on the show, Eric, I'm going to say it. He's an amazing painter. He's fantastic.
Incredibly, yeah. Actually, we should just come out and say that we're giant Eric fanboys.
We
for
are
his painting, among other things.
Among other things, but Eric's painting is amazing. And so if you paint and you get a chance to talk to an amazing painter, you always want to kind of get a brain dump. What are some, give me those 2 or 3 great techniques that I could add to my repertoire to kind of make my models just look a little bit closer to what yours look like. So we figured, why don't we share that with everybody?
Right.
So Eric, the first question I always ask any painter, which is kind of like the boxers or brief question, really, right? It's do you prime with black or white? Let's just get it out there now.
I think I'm actually kind of strange because I actually brush on white primer.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Now, why do you brush it on?
Because I never got that. I would always run into problems with either not incomplete coverage or just not just a little graininess or one thing or another with the spray on. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go over this model in detail probably 30 times while I'm painting this. So I can go over it roughly once with a brush on primer to get my uniform coat that I want.
Neat.
So,
now,
that's my first.
That's interesting. I never would have guessed
suggestion.
Now, do you paint? Do you use where do you find a brush-on primer? Do you use something you prime your wall with, and where do you find that kind of stuff?
It's been a little while, but I actually used a Reaper brush-on for a really long time.
Okay.
I liked it, but yeah, I would go down to literally like Hobbytown and try out some white primers and they do a great job. I mean, all you're trying to do is make your paint stick. So there's no real mystery to it.
Interesting. Now, and did that work just as well did you have a different you that for metals and plastics? Didn't matter. Same technique.
Yeah, pretty much always the same stuff.
Oh, cool. And now, why white over black? What was your thinking there?
It's easier to shade it's easier to paint black over white and make it look black than paint white over black and make it look white. So if I want my highlights to really pop, it takes way more layers if you're painting those highlights over black than if you want your shading to be dark. So it's just sort of an ease of multiple layers sort of technique.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, it's the vibrancy of the colors with whites, and us lazy painters like myself we prime black because I can then skip whole sections of the models and not worry about painting in the little armpits. But you're going for those really nice bright highlights and things like that, right?
Well, I can also talk to the fact that you don't actually when you prime black, there is that sort of urge to be like, well, it's black, it's shaded area, I want it to be black. But actually, if you look at shadows, look at the world around you, shadows aren't black. Shadows tend to actually be bluish. Mm-hmm. So if you and bluish actually registers in your eye as darker than a pure black. Okay. So it's actually kind of doing yourself a disservice to just leave that black, because you're not getting the proper shading that you could really make your contrast in your model pop.
Okay, so do you paint? So you go back in and you shade. You're actually going back in and shading in the tones you're looking for, so in different blues and things like that. As you go,
exactly.
Okay, very cool. Well, I want to pick your brain more on those techniques. Then that sounds awesome. But before we get there, I think we got to start at the beginning, which
I was gonna say we kind of jumped.
I'm already all the way. I see. I can't. This is gonna be crazy. I'm telling you right now.
This is gonna be difficult to control.
And you just jump in, because I'm just gonna keep. Right.
You guys come down to the donut shop, talk about anything you want with painting, and now we got to start at the beginning. That wasn't part of the deal.
That wasn't part of the deal. Well, I guess ask this, because especially when you talk to people who really do amazing paint jobs like yourself. I mean, I guess the first question is, what do you use for tools? I mean, are you using the same stuff we're using, or first of all, how do you?
What about the beginning? Like Eric, how did you get into painting?
Oh, okay, you can go there even.
Just very quickly. I mean, we don't want to waste all of our time when we've got you here to talk about technique, but just out of curiosity, like where did your painting hobby begin?
It actually began with painting role-playing miniatures in college for wanting to role-play. And then it went to 40K pretty quickly, and that's where it sort of went, oh, now I have to paint 700 of these things. And that's sort of improves your painting skill after your 700th Tyranid, and then after a while you're like, well, maybe I can paint these a little better. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, because I can never paint 700 miniatures again. Because it'd take me my lifetime.
Right.
But that's sort of the origin. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then you sort of got I'm actually a very competitive person, so I'm like, I'm going to paint better than everyone. And, that became my obsession for a while.
Now, have you done competitions at any level?
Yeah, I've competed, I guess, in 2 Golden Demons.
And how'd you do?
I have 7 or 8. I forget.
That's
number.
what I was looking for.
There you go.
See, we got our bona fides.
So
right
you're just getting the
there.
cred there. I see how you're doing that.
Yeah. See what I did there?
Yep, nicely done. So Eric is an amazing painter.
And we saw Eric painting. The first time we saw him painting was at the charity speed painting event at Gen Con years ago. And not only is he an amazing painter, and not only, of course, in the speed painting where you have an hour, is he super fast, but he's incredibly witty while he's painting super fast.
Right. That how do you focus, or do you just painting so long it's almost like the back burner in your brain doing the painting?
Well, I mean, this is sort of a big secret of painting is it's like the advanced techniques are really just the really simple techniques done at a sort of repetitive and minute level. So just get, the more you get comfortable with just like applying paint where paint should be, at a finer and finer level, so I mean, there's really no like thought to it really. Once you sort of decide where paint needs to go, then you just sort of apply 17 layers, and
right.
when you do it that way, it looks better than 4 layers.
So you're just saying it's more of what we do now over and over again, but in very small stages, right?
Exactly. It's like walking is hard when you started, but eventually you can walk and chew gum.
All right, fair enough. Well, so yeah, let me ask you about the tools though, real quick, and I just want to make sure that you use the same tools as us mere mortals over here. Are there any like what does your workbench look like? I mean, what do you normally have? Do you have just like the regular? Are there particular brushes you like to get? Are there certain prep tools you always do? What separates your paint bench from everybody else's, or is it pretty much what you'd expect to find there?
I have one brush. It's a size 1, series 7 miniature brush. And
right.
Some people don't like miniature brushes because they're shorter and hold less paint, but that's what I like. So, I mean, it's really the same brush. You can go on to DickBlick.com and get for $12 or $10. So it's not the cheapest brush in the world, but once you take care of it, I think I've gone through, probably will last me 20, 30 miniatures before
Wait,
I'm sorry.
screw
Where
up
do you
somehow.
where do you get that paintbrush again?
Write that down. He only has one brush.
What's it called?
What?
Does it paint by itself?
The website where you get this paintbrush. What is it called?
DickBlick.com.
Dick Blick.
There you go.
Okay, good. I got a little nervous. This is a family show.
It's pretty much the best art supply website you will ever find.
Oh, nice. There's a good tip right there.
Oh, look,
And
there
you
it
can get
is.
everything you want from.
Auto populates with Google.
Right.
Yeah, it's been, your non-artist is showing through.
Ow! Look, dude, I've been nothing but nice to you.
No, so Eric, seriously, you only have one brush? You don't like have different size brushes?
No, that's it.
Wow.
That's all I use. I have several of them in a various state of sort of misuse, because there'll be times where, with base coats you don't need the one with the really fine tip because you're just going to screw up that tip.
Right. So
But
you don't.
Just keep one brush with a good tip, and you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as it holds a fair amount of paint in the bristles, and then has a good tip. That's all you need.
Wow.
And what manufacturer do you recommend?
See about the tools?
Winsor & Newton Series 7 Miniature, size 1 is my brush.
Windsor
My
and
brush.
Newton. Is my brush.
Look,
That's
it's my
still
brush.
killing me.
No, it's killing me.
One
It's like an
single
author's.
brush.
Like I only use a full flow ink pen of quill. No, seriously though, Eric, the most painters at your level, is like sort of a thing. It's like a golfer. I always use this particular club. I always use this particular brush. Is that because I have like about 30 brushes. I don't even know what I grab every time. It's like I'm shocked you get away with one all the time. That's amazing.
Well, I mean, I think maybe golfing isn't the best analogy, but maybe miniature golfing is. Like, you ultimately have a ton of different things. You're going through windmills and stuff, but you're
still
doing
using a
basically
putter.
the same thing over and over again.
Okay, fair enough. Now, do you ever get when you're painting a particularly large model, though? Do you ever feel the need to get a larger brush, or do you just sort of, as you said before, you're doing the same thing over and over again? There's lots of it.
You're really trying to break down the simplicity of my one brush statement.
I am. I'm just shocked.
I do have a tank brush, which
there it is. See, I knew you had a tank brush. I knew you had one. Now, but
I was gonna say, somehow I doubt. I couldn't see you out there doing the hanging tree with a single size 1 brush.
I bet he does.
You're right.
Busted.
No, but that's still amazing though that most of your work. So, but basically, you're saying when you're painting a single model, like a normal, like a master or something, you're doing same brush. Whether you're doing the eyes, the legs, the cloak, it's all the same brush.
I just want to say that the list price of the one brush that Eric uses is $30.19.
They said it was $12. It's been a while since I
it's $13.50. It's $13.50 if you get it on the Dick Blick site.
Go. See,
I'm just saying list price. Look at that. So you buy this one $30 brush, and you too will paint as good as Eric Johns. He guarantees it.
Right.
I just told you how to get it at 75% off.
That's right. That's a great deal. That's fantastic.
That's true. You do deserve some sort of some sort of leeway.
I think it's great. So okay. So you pick your favorite brush, right, which makes sense. And are there certain paints you prefer, or does your paint selection vary depending on the kind of project you're working on?
It's actually kind of funny because for the longest time I just used Games Workshop paints, Citadel standard paint line. And at some point I just changed to P3. And Mike McVeigh actually chatting with him about his formulation convinced me to do it. And what more than how they work, it's just like this whole new color palette, and everything's subtly changed, and like straight up changing my paint line sort of reinvented my like vigor for painting at a certain point.
Yep. And
then I would just sort of switch back and forth. I'm like, well, I kind of like the more, the feel of my older stuff. So I'm going to go back to the GWs because they sort of have this sort of everything's slightly different. So it just feels a little different painting with each of them. But they're they're both good paints, and I recommend them both.
Yeah, I have a lot of different paints too on the both sides of that. Do you find have you tried some of the recent GW paints? I find it confusing just because there's so many choices now. But have you tried any of their new stuff yet or no? Just curious.
No, I haven't. I have like a garbage can full of paints, and that's where I store them. I didn't say I'm not throwing them out. And so I don't really feel the urge to buy more at the moment.
Now, do you paint? This may be another dirty question, but do you paint out of the pot, or do you always put a little drop on a palette, or how do you normally work with your paints?
I paint out of the pot.
Oh, see, I do too. I feel validated now.
We're just like him.
I know, except don't look as good.
Not even close.
Now, do you? Some folks swear by thinners and mediums and all that kind of stuff. Do you work with that a lot, or no, or a little bit, or sometimes, or
absolutely never.
Never. Okay.
I've never found a use for it.
Okay.
Because Pretty much my only additive has been saliva, and that's more
I
inadvertent.
love it.
I like it too. That's great.
Because I like there's stuff on my that I want to get off, and my tongue seems the quickest way.
My wife makes fun of me for that.
You say Eric does it too, honey.
So I don't think that's going to carry any weight with
It
my
should.
wife saying that Eric does it too, but I'm going to say it anyway.
It should carry weight.
It should carry
now,
weight.
What about some of those fancier stuff? Like I know I want to talk to you about blending a little bit, but do you work with? Do you ever use a wet palette or anything like that, or does that not something you deal with either?
No, not at all.
No.
I just I was actually. I mean, I guess this is sort of one of those sort of things I take for granted, which would on the outside seem really hard. But I literally, even when I'm blending paints to get a sort of custom color, I literally individually blend every brush full.
Wow.
And I've just gotten, I mean, I can't explain it, but I've gotten to the point where I can literally do it the same every time through
Just
an entire
eyeballing it?
miniature.
Wow.
I can't really explain how that happened or why I decided to go that extraordinarily hard route.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of one of those subconscious things that I don't recommend anyone trying.
I was going to say,
it's now how I paint.
great. Now we're going to talk about cool painting techniques. Oh, it's nothing but natural born talent, God given or otherwise. Sorry.
That's cool. That is pretty amazing, though, Eric.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah, no, I can't recommend it, and I can't say it's a good idea to try.
So, what are some as a person who does obviously a lot of painting and high level painting, and obviously know a lot of other high level painters? What are some of the things that I think like an average painter, someone who paints like myself, who paints a lot of table quality models? What are some things that you think folks like me probably think are very, very hard, but are actually kind of easy if you knew the right way to do it? Can you give a couple of maybe a technique or two?
Things that are very, very hard that are actually very easy.
Or is that a pretend thing? Am I imagining there's some secret trick I don't know that I wish I did know?
I think, and this is sort of a funny thing that really sort of revolutionized my painting, but it wasn't. I mean, I think the placement of highlights to make something look realistic, and to make reflection points and things just sort of stand out and go, oh, that looks like a miniature version of a real object, rather than that looks like a figurine with paint smothered all over it. And just the placement and the consistency of highlights and the fact that understanding the fact that you're creating a complete illusion, you're not just sort of painting something. Basically you're trying to trick the eye into believing something that's small is something that's lifelike. And sort of that just seems, that's sort of getting your head around that is, I think, mystifying to a lot of casual painters.
Right.
And it was for me too until I worked at it and I stared at miniatures and I just stared at online miniatures, stared at other people's painting, and it just didn't get to me. And I think the biggest thing that kind of got me past and over that hump was actually not looking at miniatures, was sort of walking around life and looking at how things looked. And by that I mean not just like, oh, that looks like a TV, that looks like some curtains, that looks, it's sort of like look at your car at a certain time of day when the sun's kind of at a 45-degree angle and see where the hot spots are, see what's light, see what's dark, see how it's highlighted. And just the same, and then look at this curtain and see how the transitions are much more gradual on a soft cloth material versus like your painted car where the transition is very harsh because they're reflections instead of
right.
And sort of the sort of leap of understanding happened not through painting a lot more, but just literally, I think there was like 6 months of my life where my wife thought I was crazy because I would just like start staring at something. What are you staring at? It's like, is there a waitress that I should be worried about? And I'm like, I was like, water glass on someone else's table that having a funny reflection, and I'm trying to figure out how I would paint that. So yeah, it's like go out into life and see how light and dark lights and shadows and stuff actually look on real objects, and then figure out how to, that's literally what you're trying to recreate when you're painting. So it's like get away from the paintbrush, get away from the table, go look at life.
So is that what you? That's really fascinating, actually. And it's funny because I remember my little engineering brain, because I'm not an artist in any way, shape, or form. I remember when people talked to me about highlighting and light sourcing and all that stuff. I'd be like, well, no, because it's a 3-dimensional model. Shouldn't it automatically light source itself? I mean, right? If I paint the cloak evenly and put it under a lamp, then the lamp will put shadows on it, and it should just work, right? I mean, but I get what you're saying, because the scale is wrong. It doesn't really work that way, so you have to kind of make it look right.
Exactly.
Is that sort of the idea? So, I guess, so is that, since you talk so passionately about light sourcing, is that sort of the next? Is that where you sort of see what makes an average paint job to a more exceptional one, is if people are really getting their light sourcing correct and their highlighting correct? Is that sort of when you look at it and go, okay, this guy's really at a level above what you normally see on the table? Is that sort of what
I think definitely. I mean, obviously blending is just one of those tools that, once you learn how to blend, your quality paint job goes up. But yeah, I mean, you can blend beautifully and your model still doesn't look convincing. It's beautiful blending, but I don't understand where this model exists in space. You don't give me where light is coming from. You don't give me what the shadows look like. So really understanding what light does and how light would play off an object of that size, and then recreating it at 1.5 inches tall. I think that really is that next level, understanding just how light would work on something and then creating that illusion in a miniature form.
Oh, cool. So you mentioned 2 techniques right there, light sourcing and blending. And let's talk about blending first, because we've talked about the show some very basic painting techniques, but I don't think we've ever even gotten to the level of blending. We usually talk about, dry brushing or some very simple techniques to pick out, very simple highlighting techniques. But can you describe what you mean by blending and sort of the basics of how someone could start practicing it and try to improve their blending techniques?
Well, I guess blending probably isn't my technique, because blending assumes you have 2 different colors of paint, which are sort of wet blending together on the model. And I really always did layering or feathering, which is, I guess, it all comes down to semantics and terminology, obviously, but I guess that's a different type of blending, where you literally just layer up thin layer after thin layer. And you sort of you layer down your shadow into crevices. You layer up your highlights towards the hot spots, and so literally you end up with 30, 40 layers of very thin paint to get the effect you're looking for.
So, and just be clear for our listeners, we're talking about something like, let's say there was sunlight hitting a blonde woman's head, right? So the lower parts of her hair would be sort of that darker gold or almost brown, and then near the crown of her head would be a very bright, almost white. And we're talking about the layers, the shading from dark to light, and how you would handle those layers. And you're saying you'd be sort of feathering slightly lighter shades as you went up from the bottom of her hair. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. You get thin. You use thinned paint that actually dries rather quickly when you put it on the model. Thinned paint, and you just literally just sort of feather a layer in, and it tints it slightly. You do it again, it tints it a little bit more. You increase or decrease the area you're tinting to make that darker, and you sort of increase your layers in succession until you have the look you're looking for. I mean, sort of once you figure out that technique, you can. I mean, that's sort of like the simple technique that once you know it, you can pretty much do anything and put paint how you want it wherever.
And not to be. I'm just really curious about this, because it's something I've never really been good at. So when you go in there, are you thinning it with just the lighter shade of color, or are you thinning it with your saliva, or how are you thinning the paint to make it, less dark?
Yeah, just I literally thin it with water, and usually, and this is one of the sort of funny things everyone always says, is like, you want to thin your paint to the consistency of milk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? What is the consistency of milk? So that's sort of one of those like pieces of advice that if you go on painting forums, you'll see all the time, and makes no sense. It makes no sense to me, and I've done it a billion times. And so sort of my advice is, you're not trying to thin it to consistency of milk. You're trying to thin your paint to the point where it is inside the bristles of your brush rather than sitting outside on top of the bristles of your brush, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Literally, if you have paint that's thicker paint that's just sitting on the outside of your bristles and you're applying it, you can't blend with that.
Oh, okay.
You need to look at your brush and see the color of your bristles, because the paint is thin enough to be actually held within the bristles. And then when you paint with that, when you put the brush to the model, the paint will start flowing out of it. So that's what I would say. That's what you can blend with.
Oh, that's a great tip. Now you're talking. That's the kind of thing I can latch my teeth onto.
There you go.
Great. That's cool. So so you're just working your way up, lighter and lighter shades, either by using different shades of paint or just mixing with white or the brighter color you're heading towards, or you just literally just. So you're getting for the same consistency every time, but it's just you're moving your shades up by blending with a different color, right?
And the thing is also ultimately and this is another sort of quick tip is to make. I mean, a lot of people think, okay, if I'm painting like a blue cloak, I want dark blue for the shades and light blue for the highlights. And then if they have a red scarf, I want dark red for the shades and bright red for the highlights. And the number one thing I would suggest to make that illusion to the eye is shade the entire model with one color. Oh. So pick a dark blue and shade your red with the dark blue. Shade your blue with the dark, your yellow with the dark blue. So and you have to play with it a little bit, but ultimately that's what creates a uniform sort of shade, like a dark, like that's what the dark shade really reflects what like the dark ambient light would be in a room,
right? And
it doesn't change from cloth to cloth or object to object. So you really want to keep that consistent. So okay. Yeah, so you pick what your shading color is, and I like something like shadow gray a lot. Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what paint line that is.
GW.
Yeah, shadow gray, or I guess
unavailable anymore,
sadly.
Photography Press has one too. Coat gray, I think.
Yeah, gray coat gray.
But
yep.
And you can mix in a little dark blue and a little black to get just the shade you're looking for. But then you just literally can sort of shade all the dark areas you want in very fine layers, I might add, because if you do it too heavily, then it'll look funny.
Yeah.
And just shade towards that dark color. And if you have that uniform shading technique, then it'll actually trick the eye into thinking it's an actual object.
Oh, cool! That's great. I'm going to try this
one.
Yeah, I'm going to try this my next centerpiece model. That sounds really cool. So, so let me ask you this: so you're going to shade the entire model with sort of the same tone, which makes total sense to me when now that you describe it that way. Do you normally, when you're painting a model, since and this kind of gets into my other thing I want to ask you about, because it seems like painters at your level are always looking at the idea of how the blending works and how the light sourcing works, and which always amazes me because I have such a hard time getting into my head. Do you do the blending from the light sources angle at the end? So in other words, would you paint, you described a blue cloak and a red scarf. Would you paint the scarf red, paint the cloak blue, and then go in and shade them both sort of at the same time, kind of looking at the model and figuring out where your light's coming from to kind of make sure you're getting the right angle for both pieces? Or do you kind of do the cloak by itself and kind of intuitively know where it all should go? I mean, how do you kind of keep it straight in your head where your light source is coming from while you're painting?
Yeah, I really literally, I go over and block in my colors. So if I want my blue cloak, my red scarf, the flesh-colored face, red hair, leather boots, I will just go in and literally paint everything the sort of neutral tone of that color. Mm-hmm. And I'll then show. There are a lot of times where I'll do that, and I'll have that miniature at that stage. And you don't even have to really be that careful to keep your lines straight at this point, because you're going to be shading towards the lines. So any colors that bleeding into the wrong section will just get shaded over.
Oh, right.
So I'll take this picture and I'll show it to someone, and they'll be like, and you won Golden Demons? And I'm like, yeah, it's an early step. Because it just looks like the type of miniature that when someone was starting out painting, they're do pick color and they're really happy to mostly get it in the right spot.
Right.
And that's my first step. That's you don't have to make it look beautiful every time you put paint on it. You just got to kind of get that. You're going to be shading. Like I said, you're going to be shading. Usually, you're shading where two pieces of color come together. Like there'll be a crevice there, so you don't have to get the colors perfect, because you're going to be shading that over, and it's going to sort of obliterate the natural color with your shadow color.
Oh, right. I get it.
So yeah, I mean, and then sort of literally you're shading away from your highlight, and you're highlighting towards it all at once. Mm-hmm. And that's just like I said, you pick one color for your shading. Typically, you'll pick basically one color for your highlights. I pick white usually, but people use yellows or even like light oranges sometimes to sort of represent a sunny, if you want outdoors, you typically use a yellower, nature feel.
Right. It makes more sense to me too. I love the tip of use the same color, because I couldn't imagine, like shading, like if you're working, let's say that where that red scarf meets that blue cloak we've been talking about, trying to find the right red, and you're getting closer and closer to the meeting point. No, now I got to switch over to blue and go to, but really that's not what's happening, right? You're kind of going in, starting with that one shadow shade, right? Whatever it is,
both basically your red and your blue are both slowly transitioning to the complete shadow color.
So
so by the time line where the red and the blue meet, there is no red and no blue. There's just shadow.
And also what's interesting, I'm just realizing now too, this has really helped me a lot. I hope the listeners are getting something out of it. But I was thinking in my head, okay, he's got to keep mixing up that shade. He's got to keep changing his gray's shade, but that's not really what happens, right? You're using the same paint. You're using that certain consistency you've got, which is that just the right amount so you can see your bristle color. And it's just the number of times you go over a particular section of a model that makes it darker. So near the, higher up on the scarf, you may only go over it once with that shade, but then as you get nearer and nearer to the seam between the scarf and the cloak, you're going over it maybe 10, 30, 40, however many times it takes to make it really dark in the middle. But really the paint's not a new mix. The consistency's not a new mix. It's just how many times you go over it. Does that sum up how it works?
Pretty much. Yeah, you pretty much exactly got it.
Cool.
And that works because of the white primer, right?
It doesn't hurt.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, if you were going over black primer, then you wouldn't be able to control the shading by the number of coats, because it would be almost going in the reverse. You get less color and more of the black coming through with, I guess, is the way I would think it would work.
I mean, I think ultimately the reason why, going all the way back to your first question, the reason why I use white primer is because I pretty much just obliterate the primer. I don't use it at all. All it's there is to hold the paint to the model. Because like I said a few minutes ago, I will go through and do a sort of neutral tone or mid-tone base coat of all the different sections.
Right.
So even before I start blending, you don't see any primer anymore. And it's just easier to get an even consistent layer of whatever your mid coat is.
Because you painted that scarf, the red of the scarf, right to the blue of the cloak, and the blue of the cloak right to the red of the scarf. And as you said before, you might even have smudged it a little bit in some red scarves on some blue cloak, but it doesn't matter, because when you go back and darken it in with your shade coat, when you get to that level, it's going to be all that shade color anyway, because it's so close to the seam, right? So there's really no primer visible whether it was black or white.
Right.
Right, I get it. That's really cool. I got to try that now. That's really interesting.
But I'm thinking the light color is helping you control using this technique.
The nice part is
awesome.
the brightest part of the scarf is really bright because it's over white instead of over black. That's one helpful thing. Cool. And then you do the same thing in reverse when you're getting to the highlight of the top of the scarf. You're just going in white. So now you're going to go up a little bit and get it a little bit shinier.
Exactly.
I got it. Wow.
So I mean, ultimately, you break it down to just few very simple techniques. You just do them over and over again.
And the key is being patient, right? Because you're talking about, is it literally like 30 or 40 passes on some of these parts of the model?
But there's also an added benefit. If you put 30 or 40 really thin layers, your paint doesn't chip. Because, it's just like 30 or 40 layers of metal in a sword is better than a sword that's just pressed.
Oh.
It's much stronger. You have those thin layers and it bonds together in your paint and makes it a much stronger paint job. It won't rub off on your thumb.
There it is. Eric Johns, Damascus Painter. That's awesome. So that's fantastic, Eric. That's really, really, God, I can't wait to try that out now. And I really get you're the first person to ever explain it to me in such a way that I actually understand how this all works, I think. So let me ask you this. So we're talking about 30 or 40 coats or whatever it is. Now I get now that it's the same color everywhere. That makes it in my head now a little bit easier, but still a lot of focus. Now, when you're painting like in an hour for one of these speed paint contests, your guys still look like they have light sourcing, all that stuff going on there. Do you do this basic technique just in that time period? You just maybe only get 20 coats in an area instead of 50, or how does your technique change when you're trying to be fast versus when you're trying to really make a centerpiece Golden Demon entry?
Dry brushing.
Dry brushing. Yeah.
Yeah. I admit you go back to the basics. You go back to your basic dry brushing. You just do it at a very sort of careful level instead of sort of dusting your entire miniature. Mm-hmm. And then once you do that, like literally you take the miniature, you dry brush your highlights on. So you basically you pick where your light is, you take a light color and you dry brush it on. Now you have your dark from your base coat and your light, and then you just sort of do a couple intermediate coats to kind of blend your dry brushing in, and suddenly light sourcing on a miniature in about an hour rather than 10 hours.
Oh, okay. I got to remember that too. I got to try that next for my massive farm. Now, do you paint that way for yourself still when you got a big project, or are you more of a purist and every model you paint is always going to be that certain level, or how do you approach a large scale project like 700 Tyranids nowadays?
Well, I don't approach 700 Tyranids anymore.
Right.
No, I mean, I wish I got to the point, and the more you know me, the more you will realize I'm both competitive and a perfectionist, which is why I don't play a whole lot of competitive games anymore, because I'm that guy. Right. And I've accepted that. But it's also why I don't paint a whole lot anymore, because I can't do it halfway.
Right.
I mean, and so like when I pick up a miniature to paint, I'm like, this is going to take me 14 hours.
Right.
And I look at my life and I'm like, I have a baby. I have dogs who want to go out for a walk. I have, and by a baby, Nathan. And I have, I just have things, and it just doesn't mesh. So I put the miniature down, don't paint it.
Right.
And sometimes I wish that I never sort of took that journey toward learning how to paint better, because now it sort of, the end result of that was I barely paint at all. But life's life, and I look at my golden demons, and that's enough.
That was a time. Oh, that's cool. That was awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for that. Those tips, those are great. Craig, do you have any last minute techniques you want to try to get out of Eric here before we got a Dunkin' Donuts kicks us out here?
Not that I can think of. I just no. Do you remember, Eric, what model you painted that so many years ago? Do you do the Gen Con speed painting? Do they do that every year?
They do that every year. I haven't done that lately, just because.
Yeah, you got this little thing going. I know.
For me than it had when I first started going. So no, I haven't done that, and I missed it. Maybe next year.
Do you because I'm trying to think, did you do the monotone what's his name? The Arcanist, the Chief Arcanist. I'm trying to think. No, you got nothing.
Ramos.
Yes, Ramos. Was that your painting?
That was my painting.
See, I knew that. And you did everything in black and white.
And a little blue.
And that's right. Yeah. Oh, to point it out that the fire was blue, right?
Well, no, there was a lot of blue.
Was there? Oh, okay.
I go back to the technique that your eyes just sees dark blue as shadow. So you get blue shadows and you think black, but they're blue.
See, you tricked me.
Eye tricks you. Everyone's eye tricks them.
Nice. So you said gray coat gray or shadow gray for your shadows, but what's your favorite blue for the shadows?
Both of those are blue grays.
They're really blue grays, right? Okay. So my eyes tricking me to make it look gray. So there you go. See what I know. Shows what I know.
Dark down with a little bit of black.
Yeah.
They're both blue grays.
Now, are there any, before I let you go, people always ask us this question. We have a couple tips for it, but I don't know if you have any tips. Any tips for eyes and faces, or is it just pretty much get good at getting the paint where it needs to be?
Go to Dick Blick and buy the brush with a really nice tip.
He's got stock in Dick Blick, Craig. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I don't care. I already ordered mine.
I know. I'm going to go there right after the show and order 3 of those number one ones there.
Just like it, and it has saved me $17 a brush through
nice
70 brushes in my lifetime. So
nice. There you go. Great. Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking this time out of your busy schedule and away from the baby and Nathan and everyone else there. And
is that Nathan in the background that we're hearing?
Hopefully not. But yeah. So and thank you very much for joining us at Dunkin' Donuts here. Was your Boston cream up to your expectations there?
It was good. I might need another.
Oh, good. I'll get you one more for the road. I don't mind.
Yeah, it's a long drive.
It's the least we can do for coming all the way out here and joining us on the show. So thanks again, Eric, and happy paint. I hope you can find some time to paint. Just something small, maybe a goblin or something. Keep your brush wet, as they will.
There you go. Do a gremlin.
I eyeball Golden Demons, and every once in a while, I'm going to show up one day, and people are like, I thought you stopped painting, and I'll be like, nope.
No, I still got it, baby.
Just long enough. I started again just long enough to do this.
Right.
But that hasn't happened.
No, but you got to let us know when it does, though, because we want to be there.
We want to be there. Right. We'll be there with cameras.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks again, Eric.
Awesome.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.
To be or not to be, that
right,
is the question. Whether it is noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles.
And by opposing, end them. Yes, yeah.
End them.
Right. Right. Good.
You just yada yada Hamlet.